Great. Well, we're here to talk about something that's kind of fun, and I'm really looking forward to this. Talk about Marceline. I see a few new faces here. Just for folks that are new, we get together every Saturday, talk about items of interest, whether it's Disney parks, World's Fairs, theme parks, or sometimes just esoteric history, that sort of thing. So if you've not been here before, you're more than welcome to join us in the future. And appreciate everybody coming. So this week we're going to talk about Marceline, and Roger is going to give us the talk. So Roger, would you care to give folks just a little background about you and what got you interested in this particular subject?
Sure. Well, nice to meet everybody. I've been on Bill's Zoom a couple times, but I'm not a regular for sure. But been a long time Disney fan, excuse me, and recently retired in the last couple years, so I have more time on my hands. So been starting to do more digging into Disney history and stuff like that. But I've been associated with the Marceline Museum, the Walt Disney Hometown Museum, for probably the last 7 years, 8 years, and the last 4 years or so, I've been on the board of directors. So that's my association. I live in California. I live out in Yorba Linda, so I'm a Disneyland native, Disneyland local. I went to Marceline, like I said, the first time maybe around 7 years ago, and it really impacted me. And already being a Disney fan and a Walt fan, it was really cool to go there. And what I tell people is that when you get there and you experience the town and the museum and everything, you just get it. And hopefully, if you haven't been there, you get a chance to go. But yeah, you just get why Walt loved the place so much. So I've been very enthusiastic about sharing Marceline and its story with whoever will listen to me. A lot of my friends have heard me talk about it a lot, but I've made presentations in Hong Kong, Disneyland at Disney University there, and to cast members there. I've made some Zoom presentations and hoping to hit a couple more places. So thank you, Bill, for giving me the opportunity to speak here and speak to this group, and maybe you could give some new information about Marceline that you guys don't already know. So hopefully that's the case. So
Great.
I don't know if you want to jump into the presentation
Yeah,
or.
just a quick question for you. Do you want questions asked during the presentation or held until the end?
I don't mind. I've done presentations both ways where it's interactive or where people just sit on their hands. And actually, it'll probably go a little bit longer if we take questions in between. But if people are okay with, not time crunched, then then we could definitely take questions and have, short discussions along the way. This presentation, like I said, is going to be tailored from something that I gave in Hong Kong just in March. So it's kind of more for the Disney history novice a little bit. So I'm going to skip over a lot of that or go through it that stuff really fast. But you'll see when we go through it that I kind of give a context to Marceline for people who don't really know about it. I think probably most of your crowd here is already knows about Marceline to some extent, and if not been there already. You'll see the parts that I'm going to skip over. I don't think we have to go over stuff like Los Angeles and Chicago and stuff like that. You guys know all that stuff. But I just put it in for context. So,
Great. Okay. Let me share the screen here and get it started for you.
and if you can make sure the volume is up on it, because there are some audio clips and video clips that have sound to it. So, just want to make sure everybody hears it, and we could test it when we get to the first one.
Great. Okay.
All right.
So let me stick this in full screen for you. Let's see. Okay. Is that gone full screen for everybody?
Yes, looks
Yep.
great. All
Okay.
right. So this is my presentation on Marceline. It's going to be kind of two parts. The first part's going to be about the history and when Walt was there as a child, and the second part is more about when Walt returned as an adult. So as everybody's heard, and the age-old argument about Main Street USA at Disneyland being a copy, and I do air quotes of Marceline's Main Street. That's the argument that a lot of people have, and I like to say, and especially being associated with Marceline now, that I truly believe that Main Street was in Marceline inspired his idea for wanting a main street in Disneyland. But a lot of Harper Goff's influence, Fort Collins, all that, so I never try to overstate it and say that it's a copy of Marceline's Main Street. I hear some people say that, and it makes me cringe a little bit. But we definitely, hopefully everybody can agree that it definitely has some inspiration from the Main Street that Walt experienced as a child in Marceline. So I just put up this one photo or this one slide to show that. And um, I want to point out the photo here on the right is the Hotel Marceline that you guys know is on Center Street on the east side of Disneyland's Main Street. So just there is a Hotel Marceline there. And if we go to the next slide, I'll show a couple more references around the world. So besides the Hotel Marceline at Disneyland Resort, we have Marceline Confectionery. And if you go to the Main Street Cinema, if you go check Tilly, not right now, but Tilly, when she's normally wearing her regular costume, her name badge says that she's from Marceline, Missouri. Right now for Disney 100, I noticed they swapped it out and she has Mickey Mouse as her favorite character. But normally she would have Marceline as her hometown. So that's very cool. All right.
Where is Marceline exactly?
Oh, we'll get to that. I'm glad someone asked that because I have a slide for that for people in Hong Kong and Tokyo. When I talk to them, they don't know, but I figured you guys would all know. But we'll see that. All right. So this is again to just I took side by side photos and I painstakingly tried to get the similar angles of different locations, not to show that it's a copy, not to prove that, but to just show there is a look and feel to both places that are very similar. So on the left is the Zerker building, and it's one of those corner style buildings, corner entrance style buildings that many towns of that age had. But you could see that, Walt definitely wanted to have something similar to that in his main street. So that's Coke Corner, Refreshment Corner. Um, on the top right is the Uptown Theater on Main Street, Kansas Avenue and Marceline, and then the Main Street Cinema. That's actually Hong Kong's, I believe. No, that's Disneyland's. It's got the Indian in front. So, and then on the bottom, I just took a picture of the Main Street clock, and you could see the awnings and the brick buildings, and that's you can see why people would make an argument it's a copy, but it really isn't. It's just inspired. So, all right. Over at Walt Disney World, there are just a few references that I know about, and if you guys know more, chime in. I'd love to be able to update this presentation or even expand it to be a whole presentation about Marceline and the Disney parks and resorts. So if you know of any, please let me know. But the obvious one and the very literal one is One Man's Dream and the Marceline exhibit inside there, where they have some photos and things on display, including a desk of Walt's Elementary School, which we'll get to later. Also in the Magic Kingdom, in one of the big parade door backstage doors, there is this P.S. Marceline, and maybe you guys have more experience or knowledge about this than me, but I've tried to figure out what P.S. stands for, because S.S. is like steamship, P.S. is like powered steam, powered ship. I've seen all different things. I don't know if anybody knows.
I think it's paddle steamer.
Paddle steamer. Okay.
Right.
All right, that's great. Good to know. But there's the P.S. Marceline. There's a little nod there on the wall there. Okay. Over at Tokyo Disneyland, they have the home store that says from Marceline to you. And it's a really cute store. It's a home store like any home store that we have at the other parks. But they have a backstory associated with it where the proprietor is named Marceline, and her backstory is that she was born in Marceline and she loves doll houses, and that's why there's a little doll house. And she's decorated the store and all of the period, the Marceline turn of the century period and stuff like that. So that's nice. Over in the Disneyland Hotel, there is the Marceline Salon for the concierge customers for them to experience the Marceline Salon. At Hong Kong Disneyland, since their main street is pretty much a copy of Disneyland's, they also have a Hotel Marceline, but they also have a Marceline train car. they have one of the trains they pull has all the different significant cities of Disney, Glendale, Burbank, etc., Orlando, Anaheim, and so Marceline's one of those. And they also have the Marceline Music Company, which is where the Mad Hatter shop is at Disneyland, if you're familiar with that. So they have a couple references there in Hong Kong too. And this is what I'd like to show the people at Hong Kong because it's their park. All right. More recently, on the Disney Wish, they opened up the Marceline Market, which is I haven't been on the ship, but I understand it's like a food dining location. I don't know if it's buffeteria or what the exact service style is, but they have the Marceline Market there. So just another example. So can we show that other slide right
Yeah.
now? Thank
Let me,
you.
I'll just have to stop the share here 1 second.
Yeah, while you're doing that, so I was, things that I'm omitting, obviously, as far as Disney parks and resorts is Aulani, which I don't know of any Marceline references. Paris, where there's a couple of obscure ones that don't say Marceline, but they're not confirmed enough for me to put my presentation. And Shanghai. And I was thinking about this morning, and I go, you know what? There is a reference in Shanghai, and it's also at Tokyo Disneyland, and it's also in California Adventure, and that's the slide that Bill's bringing up. It's the storyteller statue. So I just had this realization this morning that I should include this in this presentation and give Shanghai a credit for having this statue and Marceline in their park there. So if you're familiar with the statue, I don't know how many of you are familiar with his heel of his right foot that he has kicked up, and if you look on the bottom, there is Marceline on there. And there's a bunch of Easter eggs that are on that statue. So if you ever get a chance, take a look at it. He's got a copy of the Kansas City Star, and there's a replica of his business card, and it's a very detailed statue. So, but that reference is one that's in Shanghai, and also Tokyo Disney Sea and DCA, of course. They all have this statue.
Okay, let me go back to the other one.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, if any of you know of any other Marcelines in the parks, please let me know.
Took us back. Hang on. It just
Yeah.
goes back to the slide.
Sorry. Thank you. That's going to be the only. It's the Lady and the Tramp one. Yeah.
Doesn't the casual tourist see that Marceline name and wonder what's it all about? They would have no idea.
I'm sorry, I missed that.
Yeah, and would the casual tourist seeing the name Marceline look at it and just scratch their head and say, what's this about?
Oh yeah, of course. I think 90% plus of the people don't know why there's Marceline in the parks. And that's one of my goals, is to get more of the cast members to know about it so they could tell stories, and we can get more information out there about why Marceline's out there. And I want people to understand why was important to Walt too. So another reference to Marceline that Walt had was in Lady and the Tramp, in the main street there. You could see it has very similar look and feel, and supposedly, he wanted something that looked like Marceline. And another one is So Dear to My Heart. Very not too well known movie, but as you can see the quote there from Walt, he says that's the life my brother and I grew up with as kids in Missouri. So it's supposed to kind of represent his time in Missouri and that Midwestern lifestyle and all that. So this is kind of where I kick off the description of where Marceline and all that is. So I started out with this old Santa Fe railroad map. And of course, Walt was born in Chicago. A lot of people who have heard of Marceline mistakenly think that he was born in Marceline because he always referred to it as his hometown. But it really was not his birthplace. We know that he was born in Hermosa in Chicago. So started out in Chicago. Let's go ahead and we'll follow the railroad track. Of course, this is his parents, so we don't need to go through this. You guys know that this is the house in Chicago. Go ahead. That's him and Ruth on the porch of Chicago. And this one I want to talk a little bit about. So this one, I couldn't find a photo of the family when they were younger, but I wanted to discuss the family here because this is the Disney family. with his parents and his brothers, Herbert, Raymond, and Roy with him. And I wanted to point out that his brothers, Herbert and Roy, were very, not instrumental, but influential in where the family moved. Not completely, but they were one of the reasons why the family moved around, and we'll get into that. And another person who was very influential of where they moved around is the next slide, and that's his uncle Robert Disney. Another person, and you guys all know about Uncle Robert's house in Kingswell. But when the older boys, Herbert and Raymond, they were much older than Walt and little than Roy, they were starting to hang out with the wrong crowd in Chicago. And the parents and Elias were not liking that and said, you know what, we need a change of sceneries before our boys get into trouble. So Uncle Robert, who had land in Marceline, said, hey, why don't you guys buy a plot of land out here in Marceline, and why don't you come out and do some farming? So that was the kind of the motivation for them to move to Marceline. So they bought a plot of land and they moved from Chicago down the railroad track to Marceline. It's around halfway between Chicago and Kansas City. Okay, let's go ahead.
Video, okay.
So yeah, this one has the audio. So why don't you watch this clip?
It was a long cross-country ride for Disney. The train made stops at most of the big cities along the way and blew through countless other small towns on the line. One of them was Marceline, Missouri. Disney had first seen Marceline at the age of 4, when his father had fled the big city of Chicago and moved him, his mother, his 3 older brothers, and his baby sister to a little farmstead there. It was a place Disney never forgot.
Walt was living in the country on the edge of this town, and he was surrounded by nature. He could romp through the woods and run through the fields. There were farm animals around, and he loved animals, had a pet dog, pigs, cows, horses.
Marceline represents really the one moment in his childhood where he was a child, the place where he really was allowed to be free, where he wasn't being told what to do by his dad.
Marceline was this seemingly idyllic place, hitting Disney at a certain age. You know, the rhythm and the beat of the place is just right for a kid. It's like the last breath of something that seems to resemble a traditional childhood.
The Disney family business was a tough go. The margins were always slim, and Elias wasn't much of a farmer. Just 5 years after they arrived, Disney's father announced that the family was pulling up stakes and heading back to the city.
My dad sold the farm, but then he had to auction all the stock and things. And it was in the cold of the winter, and I remember Roy and myself going out and going all around to the different little towns and places, tacking up these posters of the auction.
Walt Disney once said that he'll never forget his days in Marceline, and almost everything important that happened to him happened in Marceline. But I think that has to include also the losing of Marceline.
Thanks. Volume was good on that, so.
Okay. Here we go.
All right, so this is mostly for people that don't know the United States geography. So, but of course, I just wanted to show where Missouri is, and Marceline is in north central part of Missouri, just east of Kansas City. So, So Walt moved there, and you can go ahead and go to the next slide. Walt moved to Kansas City, or to Marceline in 1906 at the age of 4. And like they said in the documentary clip there, that they were only there for 5 years. But so he was a very young boy in Marceline, which I think caused him to experience Marceline differently than the rest of his family, just because of his age. So this is Kansas Avenue, or Main Street USA, as they like to call it right now. The building on the right, you can't see the corner of it, but the first one on the right is the Zerker building, that corner building that I showed you earlier. And the building on the left is the Allen Hotel, which is the building that looks very similar to the Hotel Marceline in at the Disneyland Main Street. But this is around what it would have looked like, a dirt road, telephone poles, and all that back in the day when Walt got there. All right. This is a picture of the Disney farmhouse that still exists today. And the executive director of the Walt Disney Hometown Museum, Kay Mallons, actually owns and resides in this home right now. It's preserved very well because what they decide to do is they've actually entombed or encased the home in another house. They built a structure around it and then added on, because it was a very small house. So to make it more of a suitable house for living, they've added on and did an addition to it, but they've preserved the old house underneath it. And if they ever have a reason to do it, they can tear down the outer shell and re-expose the Disney farmhouse the way it was. So I think there's an audio clip on this one.
Well, they finally ended up buying this farm in Marceline, Missouri. But it was a beautiful farm. It had the most beautiful front lawn, big weeping willow trees. It was just almost things. It had 2 orchards, one called the Old and one called the New. We had every kind of an apple growing in that orchard. We had what we call Wolf River apples. They were that big. I don't know whether you've ever seen them.
No, I never have.
People came from miles around to see our orchard, to see these big things. And my dad, when they come and they'd want to see those big apples, my dad would take them out and here these, I'm not kidding you, apples that big.
So that was from an interview that Walt gave many years later. But where I'd like to play that audio clip for people in Walt's own voices, you can hear in his voice just how proud he was and how happy he was to have been in Marceline. It really comes across, and without even any visual, right? Just listening to the audio, you can hear the pride in his voice when he talks about his hometown, Marceline. I just think that's pretty cool. So like I was saying earlier, Walt was a young boy when he was there, so only 4 to 9 years old. So he was way too young to help out on the farm like his older brothers. So his other older brothers, Herbert and Raymond, and Roy to some extent too, helped out on the farm. But Walt couldn't help out much because he was too young. So he would find ways to entertain himself and his baby sister Ruth. And one of the things that he did is that in the farm, on the farm, he took the farm animals, and these are just representatives, just stock photo, but he took the animals and he dressed them up, and he invited all the kids around the Marceline area to come and see his barnyard circus. So he was going to put on a show, and he charged them like 5 cents each and just dressed up the animals, and they all just kind of sat there. They weren't trained. They didn't do anything. Well, the kids all went home and complained to their parents that the Disney boy, took their 5 cents from them and didn't even have a show or anything. And the word got back to Flora, and she called Walt in and she scolded him and made him return all the money. So I'd like to think that this was one of the first lessons that Walt learned about, if you're going to put on a show, you have to have a good show. You have to have good quality if you're going to charge people for it. So he got one of his first experiences there in Marceline, learning about providing a good show, good quality to his guests. All right. This is Walt's famous and beloved dreaming tree, which unfortunately no longer exists because it just succumbed to age and disease. But Walt loved going out to this dreaming tree. Again, since he was too young to really help out, he had a lot of time on his hands. and Walt would go out to this tree with his sister and sit under the tree, and he would dream and he would draw and sketch and he would look at the bugs. He used to call it belly botany, and he would just imagine all kinds of things. I think maybe a lot, it might have been like the inspiration for a lot of the silly symphonies and some of his early works with the animals and plants and bugs and stuff like that. So, but the dream tree unfortunately is no longer there. But we do have a son of the dreaming tree that's growing nearby. That was actually, the seeds were harvested many years ago, probably like 20 years ago, and they started seedlings, and they planted one of these son of the dreaming tree. So it's there, and it's pretty tall now. It's probably 50 feet tall now. It's growing. But another one of those same trees, a sapling, was given to Disneyland, and it's on Tom Sawyer Island. So I don't know how many of you heard that, but there is a dreaming tree, son of the dreaming tree, on Tom Sawyer Island. So next time you go there, you could check it out from the Mark Twain. It's on the backside of Tom Sawyer Island. All right. So Walt eventually got to the age where he was going to go to school, but let's play the audio clip here. There's a story about that.
Now, I didn't start to school till I was close to 7, because there's nobody to take me to school, and my birthday come in the middle of the term, so you had to be a certain age, so they just said, well, we'll wait and send them when Ruth can go. It was the most embarrassing thing could happen to a fellow, that I had to practically start in school with my little sister who was 2 years younger.
So yeah, this is Park School. So as Walt said, he had to start later on because they wanted him to start with his younger sister Ruth. So but the Park School eventually was torn down, and we'll get into that a little bit later. But that school existed all the way up until almost 1960. All right, so this is a school photo, and can you guys spot which one?
Bottom row, third from the left.
Okay, yeah, bottom row, third from the left. Go ahead and click. Yeah, I was just reading I saw the chat pop up from Warner, so.
Okay. Yeah, I can't see the chat on this side.
Yeah, to answer your question, Warner, it's not labeled, but if you guys know Marcy Character Smothers, her most recent, or one of her recent books, Walt's Disneyland, she has a description of the tree and where it's at in there. So, but anyway, this picture of Walt here in the class photo, our executive director Kay Mallins likes to say that he looks like a young Paul McCartney. I don't know if I see it, but anyway, that's him in his. This photo's also just little bit of trivia. It also is in Walt's Cafe on Main Street in Paris. That we gave them a photo, and it's actually in the restaurant there. So if you ever get to Paris, Walt's Cafe, look for that photo. This is the Santa Fe Depot as it would have been when Walt pulled into Marceline from Chicago, and also when he left. It was a wooden structure, and it was eventually torn down and replaced with the brick structure that I showed earlier on my title page. But we all know that Walt loved railroads, and his first introduction to railroads, of course, was traveling from Chicago to Marceline, and also while he was in Marceline. Let's go ahead to the next slide. He's in Marceline, Mike Martin, who was an engineer on the Santa Fe Railroad, and Uncle Mike would come through town, and he would have a special whistle that he would do, so there's a pattern on the whistle, and Walt would hear that, and he would be able to run down to the tracks near the farm, and Uncle Mike would pull him up into the cab, and he would ride the cab with his Uncle Mike. So that's where he really got his first experience riding it and loving the trains. So, and we all know, like I said, how important trains were to Walt. So I'd like to go over a couple of the first that Walt had experienced in Marceline, and you'll see the influences here. Let's go ahead and go through them. So one of the neighbors was Doc Sherwood, And Dr. Sherwood had this prize stallion named Rupert. And he noticed Walt liked to draw, and he noticed, Walt was very interested in animals and stuff. And he asked Walt if he could draw a picture of Rupert for him. This is not it, of course. But he asked Walt, can you draw a picture of Rupert for him? So Walt did, and he was paid like 10 cents for the drawing. So you can go ahead and go to the next slide. There in the museum, there's a little story about Doc Sherwood and how he asked Walt to do this first drawing. But it was the first time that Walt was ever paid for and asked to do a drawing. So kind of a start to his drawing and animation career, so to speak. Okay. Another first, and again, this is Main Street, Kansas Avenue. You can see the Allen Hotel there, but this is the parade, and we believe it's a Shriners Parade, but it could be something else. Not quite sure, haven't identified it. But Walt experienced his first parade at in Marceline, and of course, we all know how important parades have become at the Disney parks around the world. This is the Opera House. So this is the Opera House actually in Hong Kong, but of course it looks just like the one here in Disneyland. But Marceline, since it was one of the stops along the railroad, and it was a coal town and a service town for the steam locomotives, they had quite a big population for back in the day. I've heard numbers anywhere from 3,000 to 6,000 people in the area. So they actually had an opera house in Marceline. So let's go ahead and go to the next slide. So the opera house that was there on Kansas Avenue was Cater's Opera House. And there's actually, Cater's actually made opera houses in multiple cities across the country. But so they had this Cater's Opera House, and Walt experienced his first live performance, live play there in Marceline. And anybody heard or know the answer? The people that have seen my presentation, you guys could let others guess, but what his first play that he saw in Marceline was. Anybody have a guess?
Nope. Guess you got to.
All right, let's go ahead. Let's go to the next slide. He saw a showing or whatever performance of Peter Pan. So, and of course, Peter Pan, went on to become one of his classics that he made later on. All right. And of course, every year, 4th of July, they had big fireworks in Marceline, and that's where he was introduced to fireworks. And we like to think that's where his love of fireworks was developed, and why he wanted fireworks in his Kiss Goodnight at the parks. So, all right. Any questions before we move on?
No, this is great. Thank you.
All right. So the next stop for the family after 5 years, and there's different stories about why, how successful and how poor a farmer Elias was and all that. We don't really all know the exact truth. Okay. I'm just looking at the chat, sorry. So remember why I talked about Herbert and Raymond earlier and how they're influential in the family moving around. One of the reasons why the farm didn't do as well as it could is that Herbert and Raymond, being older kids, they did not like Marceline life at all, especially coming from the city. And they didn't like working on the farm. There's been some stories about that the father didn't really give them their fair share of money from what the farm earned and all that. So they decided to run away and go back to the city. So one night they actually snuck out the living room window of the Disney house, and they hopped a train back to Chicago, and they left the family. Well, that just left Elias with Roy as the only person that could help him on the farm. So I think that had an influence on his ability to actually do farming with, Walt and Ruth, of course, were too young. So I think that was very impactful. So that's why they picked up in they moved eventually to Kansas City. I know there's the Chicago Little Jaunt and all that, but the next major stop for Walt was Kansas City. All right, let's just go through these quick. So we all know about Walt, worked for his father's paper route in Kansas City, and that's where he joined the Red Cross after the end of the World War, and forged his passport. We know all those stories, but when I'm in other places like Hong Kong or Japan, I like telling these stories. Okay, let's go on. Laugh-O-Gram, we all know that was started in Kansas City. We can go through these. All right, so leaving Kansas City, we know that Walt eventually ended up at Uncle Robert's house, again, another influential person, in 1923. And so in July of 1923, he moved in with his brother Roy at Uncle Robert's house. And of course, that's where the Disney Company history is started. And I just show context of the people here, the Disney Brothers Studios and Hyperion, and eventually the Walt Disney Studios. So, all right. If you guys want to talk about that some more, we can. But like I said, I think you guys know, most have heard that from other people. So even though Walt left in 1923, he never did forget Marceline. And he would actually, on his way cross country, riding the train, they would pass through Marceline. And he was known to always point out to everybody, whether he knew them or not on the train, that they were passing through Marceline, and that was his hometown. So, like I said, he was very proud of the place. And he went up to the railroad convention with Ward Kimball, of course, and they went through Marceline. And that was kind of, one of the big kickstarters for Walt's train and all that. It's said that he returned the first time. It was an unofficial visit in 1946 as a research trip when he was starting to think about Disneyland. But it was not really advertised, and it's not documented, and there weren't any photographs taken or anything. But it said that he was there in 1946 and just quietly went into town on one of his times he was passing through. But the first time that he returned officially was 1956. So let's go ahead and go forward on that. So as you can see, it was a big deal to have Walt and Roy come back. And the reason why this happened is in 1956, Marceline at their municipal park was building a new swimming pool. So they were building a swimming pool, and they were talking. And of course, Walt by this time was already a big star, worldwide star, well known, but they all knew that he was from Marceline. So they had the idea of saying, why don't we name the swimming pool and the municipal park after Walt? So they wrote back to Walt, and they sent I don't know if it was a telegram or a letter, and they asked Walt, would it be okay if we named the swimming pool and the park after you? And Walt replied, well, sure. Is there going to be a dedication? So they didn't have any intention of Walt Disney, the famous person, coming out, but they just wanted to name the swimming pool and the park after him. And Walt was the one who said, is there going to be a dedication? They said, yeah. So Walt said, okay, well, I'll be there. And the townspeople reaction at first was, oh my God, Walt Disney's going to be coming to Marceline. And then it kind of set in on them saying, oh no, Walt Disney's coming to Marceline, which they knew was going to be a big deal. And then the panic kind of set in, saying that, well, we got to host him and eventually Roy and their wives. So we got to do something, big for this occasion. Okay. So you can see this one sounds interesting. You can see the population even in 1956 was over 3,000. Right now it's around 2,300. It is, shrinking like most towns, small towns like that. But this is Walt and Roy walking along one of the streets in Marceline in the 1956 visit. They, of course, went out to his beloved Dreaming Tree. And these are all staged photos, of course, but he took his photographers and publicists with him and all that. This is Yellow Creek, And Yellow Creek is around 2 or 3 miles from the Disney farm. The story is that Walt used to walk out here and go fishing. And when I drove it for the first time down the dirt road, kicking up dirt and driving down, and it's far, and I go, he couldn't have come this far. So I turned around and I just gave up finding Yellow Creek. Well, on subsequent trips, someone said, I'll take you out there. And we kept going. And I just couldn't believe how far it was, like almost 3 miles or so out from the house to this Yellow Creek. But supposedly Walt used to go out there, and maybe in those days kids were hardier, and that wasn't that big a deal to walk 3 miles one way and 3 miles back. But this is where he liked to fish off this bridge. A little side note on the bridge is that it's been replaced with a cement bridge right now, of course. But this bridge actually is owned and is in the possession of the museum. We haven't come up with a way to display it or anything, but if the opportunity arises and we get funding and have a way of displaying it, we can actually recreate this bridge again, because it's in storage right now. All right. Of course, he went back to park school. And you can just click it. There's just a little little visual thing. So him and Roy went back to park school to visit it because it still existed in 1956. And while they were at park school, they went into the classroom, and Walt's showing the wives and Roy the desk that he sat at. And the reason why he knew that that was the desk that he sat at is, go ahead and click, he remembers carving his initials in the desk. And those carved initials are still in the desk. He doesn't remember doing it twice, and they've looked back through the records of the school from the time Walt left the school in 1911 until 1956, and they did see that there was another student with WD initials. So the speculation is that that kid also just carved his initials there too, because Walt did not believe he carved it in twice. Now this desk, you may have thought you've seen it at one man's dream in Hollywood Studios in Florida, but that is actually a replica. The real desk was at the school for many, many years, just up until recently, like 5 years ago. And what it would do is when school was open, it was on display in the foyer of the school. And when school was out, it was on display in the museum. Well, it's since permanently been moved over to the museum. So if you go to the museum today, you would be able to see the desk, the actual desk, and not the replica that's in Hollywood Studios. And it's a little bit annoying when you read the sign in Hollywood Studios, because if you read the wording, they don't say it's a replica. So a lot of people insist that no, it's there. I've seen it. I've read the sign. It's there. And I said, okay, so Disney was very ambiguous in how they wrote that little sign for the desk there. All right. Here's the municipal park, of course, and you can see the lovely steam train and the Mickey Mouse there that they put up there. And these signs still exist today. They've been touched up and redone, but it's a throwback to the time when they came and dedicated the park. All right. This is the construction photo of the swimming pool. Of course, it was done by the time Walt got there, but this is a archival construction of the swimming pool. Okay. Now this is interesting. It's a setup photo, but it shows the kids coming over to Walt early in the morning saying, "Hey, Mr. Disney, when are you going to open the pool? We're ready to go." The house that he's standing in the garage there is actually a home of the Johnsons, Rush and Inez Johnson. And Rush and Inez were prominent people in the town. And their house there is where the Disneys stayed, both Roy and Walt and their wives stayed. And the reason why they stayed at their house is because it was the newest house in town at the time, and it had air conditioning. It was the only house that had air conditioning. So they said, we got to put the Disneys in there. So they asked Inez, can the Disneys stay here when they're visiting? And she says, oh no, we just spent all our money in buying this house. We don't have a lot of furniture. The stuff we have is old, and we can't, we shouldn't be hosting someone like Walt Disney here. Well, the town really wanted them to stay in this house. So they said, we will go and we will collect the best pieces of furniture from everybody around town, and refurnish your house for when they stay. So that's what they did, is everybody chipped in their nicest pieces of furniture and they refurnished the house for when the Disneys visited. And what Inez is still alive. She's actually the mother of Kay Malins, the executive director of the museum. So Inez is still with us, and she likes to say that after, getting to know them, Walt and Roy, over the years, she goes, that really wasn't necessary, to try to make the house look nicer. They would have been fine the way it was. But Rush, Inez's husband, and Inez became really good friends with Walt, and they kept in touch for years. And they also were in discussion about doing Project Marceline. I don't know if anybody's heard of Project Marceline, but Walt wanted to actually build sort of a theme park in Marceline to show what turn of the century farming looks like, because he thought someday that kids in America would not know what it was to farm, and what it's like to actually work with your hands, work on a farm and all that. So he was working with Rush, and in the museum we still have all the plans that they had worked on together to bring a sort of a theme park to Marceline. So that's kind of we always talk about the Mineral King and some of these other lost projects in Virginia and stuff, but the Marceline project was a real project for a while, and of course, when Walt passed, that disappeared. So this is the day of the dedication of the pool. You can see over in the top left is Miss Marceline being crowned by Walt, and the young girl there holding the pillow that brought the tiara out. That's actually Kay Malins. So she was obviously there, and Walt and his wife actually stayed, and Walt and Lily stayed in Kay's room, and she likes to tell that story, how Walt asked her which room he should stay in, and she says, "I think you should stay in the pink room." So that's where they stayed. So she likes to tell that story, that Walt slept in her bedroom when they came to the house. But you can see people from all over the area came. Thousands of people came for this dedication because they heard Walt was going to be there. Another thing that he did when he came to Marceline that trip is that he brought with him The Great Locomotive Chase. It was his newest movie, and they actually held the Midwestern premiere of The Great Locomotive Chase in the Uptown Theater on Kansas Avenue, Main Street. And Walt, of course, introduced the first showing of it. And the reason why I say the first showing is that they ran that movie continuously, supposedly for 24 hours, but long enough for everybody who wanted to see it for free. So here's Walt actually introducing the movie for the first showing there. Okay. And of course, Walt told the kids then that you are lucky to live in Marceline. My best memories are the years I spent here. So again, this is in 1956, him talking about his childhood and how grateful he was that he grew up in Marceline. All right. Now, Walt made a second trip back to Marceline in 1960. So the people in Marceline, they knew Park School was old. They knew they had to replace it. So they were building a new elementary school. So they said, well, we named the swimming pool and park after Walt, and he came out. Why don't we name the elementary school after Walt and let him know? And sure enough, Walt was thrilled. He said, of course, you can name the school after me. And he came out for the dedication of the new Walt Disney Elementary School. But he also came out with gifts. So let's go ahead and one of the gifts he brought is one of the flagpoles from the Squaw Valley Olympics. Now, a lot of you know that two of the flagpoles actually exist on the studio lot by the commissary, in front of the commissary. But one of the flagpoles was given to Marceline, and it's still in use today at the elementary school there. Let's go ahead. He brought with him a flag that flew over, that flew over Disneyland. and he presented that to the school and to the city. That flag flew probably up until I don't know the exact year, but into the 2000s. And then finally someone got the idea, you know what, we probably shouldn't let this get too much more damage. I mean, just over the years, it was just getting really bad. So they took it down and it's been refurbished and it's now preserved and hanging in the museum so you can see the flag. But this is Walt presenting the Mickey flag to the school. He had Imagineering build and send out playground equipment for the school, so he provided the playground equipment for them. Okay. And he also had Bob Moore, one of the studio artists, do these murals for not only this auditorium cafeteria room, but also for the front foyer of the school. And those still exist today. They've been painted over several times in disrepair, and they really need some tender, loving care. And can you go to the next slide? I don't know if it shows another one. It doesn't. Disney artist Alex Mayer, some of you know Alex. He generously had given his time and labor to start restoring these. So he's restored all the character art in the front foyer of the school, repainted it, wanted to be. Alex is just so meticulous about being true to history. He researched the colors, he researched the styles, because a lot of the underlying detail was painted over by janitors or whoever, maintenance people, whoever was touching it up over the years. So someone looked pretty bad. So he fixed those all up, and we're hoping that eventually we can get to getting all these fixed up again to how it was when Bob Moore did them originally. So time and money, right, for everything. So also in 1966, this is when Small World attraction was coming back from the World's Fair back to Disneyland, and they need to install it into Disneyland. So in the area, in the queue area of where the Small World is today, used to be the Midgetopia. So they knew the Midgetopia had to come out if they're going to install It's a Small World at Disneyland. So Walt decided to give the Midgetopia and donate that to the children of Marceline. And this is some of the Disney team out in Marceline installing the ride in Marceline in the municipal park. And it operated there for a few years. I can't remember how many exactly, 7 to 10 years before it eventually found disrepair and they couldn't fix it anymore. It was just hard to operate a park, a park attraction in a small town like that. It takes labor, it takes money, all that. But it was a gift that was donated from Walt. So a lot of the cars, this is the load unload area in Marceline. I think the next one is so recently, in the last 5 years, there's been a project to bring the Midgetopia back to Marceline. We have several of the cars in different states, some with chassis, some without chassis, some with motors, etc. And some of them have actually been auctioned off. And one of them was sitting in Disneyland in the Utopia ride for many years. If you rode the Utopia, you saw it up on a pedestal there, and it was fake bronzed over. So we've been trying to collect the cars back and see if anything could be done. Well, it was determined. We do have a really good example restored car in the museum that doesn't run, but it's cosmetically restored. We decided we cannot ever bring back the Midgetopia attraction as it was. So we actually had a very generous supporter of the museum actually commissioned the building of 2 replica Midgetopia cars. These are completely electric. They have batteries in them. You plug them in, you charge them up. They don't run on track. You can actually run them off the track and take them down Main Street if you wanted to. But we have 2 cars that are operating, and on special occasions they're charged up, and the kids can hop in them and they could drive them around a replica of the track that we built right outside the museum, right next to it. So it's not exactly the same. It doesn't have the hills, it doesn't have the tunnels, but it's a replica, kind of representation of the Midgetopia track. So this is Marceline today. There's the Disney Family Farm that you can definitely visit. It's open to the public. The top right is the Disney Family Farmhouse, and you can see it's a much larger structure with the Disney Farmhouse underneath it. And that's a private residence, so you can't really go in there, but that's where Kay Malins lives. And the bottom left is, of course, the Disney barn, which is a copy of the Carolwood barn, which is made from plans that Walt drew up for his Carolwood barn, that from his memory of his farm, his barn on the farm. So, but it's the exact replica, same plans as the one in Griffith Park today. And there's the Son of the Dreaming Tree from a couple years ago. So you can see it's doing quite well. It's getting bigger. And this, of course, is the museum. So it's the newer Santa Fe depot that was built after that wooden structure was torn down. It was bought back right before 2000, and for the Walt's 100 years, they actually that's when they refurbished the building and opened up the museum. The museum, most of the contents of the museum were a donation from Ruth. So Kay Malins and Ruth Disney became really good friends in Ruth's later years. And Ruth told Kay, said that, you know, I want you to eventually make a museum or show the Disney stuff that I have in Marceline, so nobody forgets about Marceline, because she knew how important it was to Walt. So when Ruth passed, her son called up Kay and said, "Hey, Mom has some stuff she wants you to have to show in Marceline." So Kay went over there with 2 empty suitcases to Oregon, and found out that there was truckloads worth of stuff that Ruth had for her. So she had to go back to Missouri, come back with trucks, brought back an archivist with her, and they went through everything, cataloged everything, and they brought several truckloads of stuff. And that's what makes up the bulk of the museum. And we have a lot of stuff that hasn't been brought out yet. So hopefully, if you guys make it out there, you'll get to see some of the cool stuff that's out there. So these are just some photos from around town, and Kay Malins and myself in Walt's office. So definitely like to invite you to come out to Marceline. It's closed during the winter months because it's just too cold and too much snow. But definitely, if you haven't been there, it's worth it, especially if you like Waltz and a fan of Walt. I think that's it. Oh, his last quote. And this is the famous quote. "To tell the truth, more things of importance happened to me in Marceline than have happened since or are likely to in the future." And that's something he said back in 1938, but I think he held that true, obviously, all the way through his life, up until 1966, when he gave the gift of the Midgetopia right before he died. So I like to tell people that obviously Walt was a big enough star, an important enough person, that he didn't have to come back to Marceline, or it's like, that it had to be important for him to keep his association with Marceline, even as an adult and a worldwide celebrity. So that is it.
On that ending note, Roger, I think people probably don't realize, you were saying he was so busy. I've had the pleasure of looking through a lot of his files and memos and everything, and he was turning down invites to just about everything, dinners and speeches and that sort of thing. And you could see all the notes he wrote to his secretary about not being able to make it. If he couldn't take a night out to go to a dinner in, say, Beverly Hills, just think how special it had to be for him to take several days to go back to Marceline. And I think that really puts it in perspective what a massive thing that was to him.
No, that's an excellent point. I knew that, he was a busy person. I haven't had the opportunity like you to go through memos and stuff, but it would be very interesting to look through his secretary's memos of the time where he's blocking out that I need to go to Marceline, right? Or I don't book me for anything. So yeah, that's a great point that, obviously, without a doubt, Marceline was important to him and, his whole life. So very cool.
Well, great presentation. There's a number of people putting things in the chat you may want to look at, but I enjoyed it. Now you made me feel like I need to jump on a train.
You really do. So I can talk a little bit about the Amtrak that goes through Marceline, and it does go through Marceline. It does not stop there anymore, it used to be an Amtrak stop. So it's very unfortunate for people who want to visit Marceline that it doesn't stop there. We've had it stop a couple times in the last several years, on special occasions. If you can get a group of 20 people or more, you can actually contract with Amtrak to stop. The platform is there, and they can actually pull up and stop, and you would actually step off onto the platform. It's not the same platform because it's a different depot now, but the same platform that Walt would have used. So yeah, it's something that you might want to look into. All right, should I go to the chat is full. Let's see. How do you usually do this?
Now, have you been on any of the D23 trips back there?
Yeah, I've been. I missed the first one, but I've gone the others. Nowadays I have to work. I volunteer for them, so yes. But several of the people that are on here today have been D23 events that they hold out there, which is a great way of going. I have a friend, and she's on right now, who actually said that it was a little bit, I don't want to say intimidating, but apprehensive to go to Marceline on your own because it's out in the middle of nowhere, and there's not a lot out there. So she's actually helping by putting together a little travel guide that hopefully we'll have online soon of how to visit Marceline, and I'm going to try to get that published somehow on one of the fan sites or on the museum website. But D23 actually, I think, brought a lot of people that wouldn't want to go out there on their own because they actually bus people there, which is nice to go as your first time to have someone drive you there because it is in the middle of nowhere. So
yeah, I've seen the pictures that a number of people have put online from their visits, and looks like the town really comes out to make everybody feel welcome.
Yeah, if someone else wants to chime in, that's been there from a guest perspective, you can. So I'm going to just look through the questions. So there was one from Werner, and Michelle's going on Tron. Presentation. Thank you for your compliments.
Well, Michelle's been there with you for the visit, so she. I guess we have to forgive her for going off the Tron.
Yeah, okay. It doesn't look like there's any questions. It's just people saying, thank you. So thank you for actually attending and listening about it. Like I said, it's dear to my heart, and I wish more people could visit. I understand that it's a challenge. I'll tell you a quick story about this last D23 event that we had just several weeks ago. Is that there's a cafe on Main Street, and it's called Mavix. And if you ever make it to Marceline, you got to eat at Mavix. It's just a little diner cafe, but they have excellent food, and you get that real hometown feeling, not just Walt's hometown, but hometown feeling. Great little place to eat. So I was eating there, taking a break, getting something to eat while I was volunteering at the event. And there was 3 Asian men eating in there. And this is the Midwest. So my joke is whenever I'm in Marceline, the Asian population of Marceline doubles whenever I'm visiting. There's no Asians in Marceline. Okay. And it's to be expected somewhat. So these 3 Asian men were sitting there eating. So obviously they're here for the big event that we held. And they were staring at me. And I go, okay, they're looking at me because I'm another Asian, I don't know what's going on there. And eventually, I think they're waiting for me to finish eating. one of them came over and introduced himself, and he said that they are from Hong Kong, and they have friends, and they had heard about me when I was in Hong Kong giving presentations, and that made them want to go to Marceline. And I was just blown away. It's like, oh my God, getting from Hong Kong to LA to see Disneyland is a good vacation, but getting all the way to Marceline is pretty special. And I would never thought that that people would want to go there or try to go there from Hong Kong, and let alone, for me to be part of the inspiration for them to go. So I was really neat to hear. So for you guys, if you're all in country, it's not as hard as the people from Hong Kong can make it to Marceline. I think you guys can too, as long as you get to Kansas City or St. Louis. It's around 3 hour drive from from St. Louis, and around a 2 hour drive from Kansas City. And it's an easy drive. You just have to have your GPS, but you can make it.
Great. We have a few people have their hands up, so we'll start with Don.
Yeah, the originally put the Midgetopia in 66 to 67. I know that couldn't be restored and you're not operating, but is the track still there from the original Midgetopia in Walt Disney Park?
It was there for a while, but eventually it got torn up because it was getting dangerous to leave it just, it was in the park for the longest time, and pieces were falling off, and I don't know if people were taking them wherever, but we don't have any of the track. So it's probably all been thrown away. It wasn't thought of as, as to preserve that at all. So unfortunately, there's no track left. So that was
Go
go ahead. Now that was another
Well,
challenge, right? To if we were to bring it back and restore the actual Midgetopia cars that ran on the bus bar and all that, it would have been quite an effort to make a track and electrify it and make sure it's safe and get all the permits and all that kind of stuff. So although it was a nice idea, we restored it back to a level that we think it's more easily maintainable. We get special insurance for when we run them just for the day, instead of buying insurance for the whole year, and all those kind of things come into play. There's the nice idea about let's bring it back and let's operate it, and then reality hits, right, and things like permits and licenses and certifications and all that comes in. So yeah.
I just know that for a long time it was like the sidewalk layout, just the layout of the asphalt or the concrete where it was still there. None of the electrical stuff or anything. I was wondering if that was left in place.
No, the cement walkway that used to be in the park too, that's all been torn up too now. So yeah.
Thanks. Warner?
No, the cement walkway was still there in 2010, which is the first time I was there in the park. But I guess it must no longer be there.
Yeah.
It's been another 13 years since I was there.
Yeah.
And it was a flat space, but it did have the little tunnel structure still. So it was kind of cool to see where it had been. But the idea of rebuilding the track over next to the museum, next to the train station in Marceline, and being able to keep an eye on it, not having it be in a distant park, but having it actually be a place that people would come to, I think it was a great idea that somebody figured out how to make it fit and that there was room for it there. And as near as I can tell, it's the same layout that was in the park, which was again based on the layout that was at Disneyland, except without the hills and such, just on a flat layout. So right. I had two things that I was going to throw in. One is, the museum is a wonderful museum. I did an article about it on my website, Yesterland, and many years ago. And I guess at the time I said, there's this big budget, wonderful Walt Disney Museum in San Francisco. There is the very conveniently located Walt Disney Museum at Disney's Hollywood Studios, if you happen to be at Disney World. And then there's the one that's really personal, the one that is that clearly comes from the family and from the heart, and not only from the family and heart of the Disney family, but also from Kay Malins and all the people who have assisted in putting it together. It is well worth visiting. I thought, it'll be a fun place to spend an hour or so. I ended up spending 2 days there, and would recommend it to anyone on this call. one of the cool exhibits that I was just going to mention about, and that's a story that Kay tells, is there's a TV in one room that shows the premiere of the television program from the opening of Disneyland. It's on an old black and white television, and there's a glass case in front of it, and there's old ticket books and all that, and you go, great, nice Disneyland history, nice nod to Disneyland. But it turns out that the TV itself has an amazing story. After Ruth Disney died, Kay Malins was out there in Oregon at the farm, going through all the papers. Ruth had been a real saver. She saved everything. And that's why 2 suitcases didn't do the job. One of the things was a receipt from a television. And Ruth's son told a story that, Walt had wanted Ruth to come out to Disneyland. Ruth didn't want to go there. So Walt bought this TV, and this receipt, this is the actual receipt from the TV. And Kay goes, wow, what a great story. I want to put this receipt on display. Well, you know, and then Ruth's son says, do you want the TV too? It's in the barn. So the TV was in the barn, and sure enough, the TV is now on display. And you realize this is the actual TV in which Ruth Disney saw her brother's Walt's Disneyland, and had been bought by Walt. So that's the kind of personal stuff you have in this museum. I mean, the museum in San Francisco is fabulous. If anyone who's in this call has not been there, you got to go there. If you're at Disney World, you've got to go in the One Man's Dream exhibit. It's a nice little exhibit that was put together for in 2001 as a temporary exhibit, and instead they've kept it up, and it's actually much more strategically located now because it's right where you go around the corner to Toy Story Land. So you got to go to that one. But don't miss the third great Walt Disney Museum, which is the one in Marceline. And again, it's a little rougher around the edges in a few places, although I was there twice, and it had gotten a lot better even from the first time to a few years later, the second time. I suspect if I go there now, it would be even better. And being on this call makes me want to go there now. I live in the Chicago area, so it's really not that bad a drive. Probably 7 hours or something from Chicago, Roger? I don't know.
Yeah, I've heard 7, 8 hours. I've never done the drive itself, but no, thanks for those very, very nice words and for sharing the story about the TV. So when was the last year you were there?
I want to say probably 10 years ago or something like that. I think I
Okay,
was there
so
2010 and 2013, 2015, somewhere in there.
like 6 years ago, 7 years ago, the museum was completely overhauled and upgraded as far as the displays and all that, and new placards were made and new signage, new display case. So it really brought forward the museum into a more museum standard. The old way was nice because it was quaint and simple, but a lot more stuff is now on display. The TV is on display in a room set up like a living room with a couch there and everything. And we actually replaced the old CRT tube with a flat screen TV, and we're playing, of course, the clip of opening day at Disneyland. So you can actually go look at the cabinet with the fake screen behind it and see that display. So yeah, that's just one of the many stories of all the things in there. There's letters from Walt. There's a lot of audio recordings that you can listen to. It's not as polished as the Family Museum, but it's improved since the time you went. So yeah, definitely worth going back. And the town itself has been going through a major renewal, and with shops actually coming into Main Street now, and there's more businesses. There's a pizza parlor now. There's that cafe diner I talked about. There's a Mexican restaurant. There's a boutique for women's clothing. There's a little bit of a revival going on. So yeah, it's definitely worth a visit.
Well, yeah,
Revisit.
Marceline has both the blessing and the curse of not being on the main road. So as a result, kind of at the time stood still there, but there were two yearbook publishers located there. So there actually was a reason for people to live there and work there. But because it wasn't on the main road, like Walmart is probably in Brookfield or whatever, the next big, town over. So downtown
Right.
Marceline never got, flattened. It never, it certainly lost business compared to when it was a town of over 3,000 people. But one of the coolest things about Marceline is just being in a town where time has kind of stood still.
Yeah, no, definitely. I know it's not exactly like how when Walt was there, but you can, like I said, you kinda get it, you can get the feel. And that's why I think if they would have done the Marceline project, that would have been a blessing and a curse too. I think it would have been nice to show people what it's like, but I don't know what it would have done to the town's feel if you had like a little theme park there or attraction there. So, but I have mixed thoughts about what it would have been if they would have actually gone forward with that Marceline project and built something there. So
Great, thanks. And Brock has his hand up.
Yeah, just a couple of things I noticed. So first off, Roger, it was a great presentation. It was really fun and interesting, and actually some of the stuff you skipped over, even though we've heard it before from other sources. It's always nice to hear it from somebody else because you sometimes get a little different perspective on things. So you don't have to necessarily drop those things out. You can do the full presentation. But a couple of things I just noticed I found interesting in the photographs that you were showing when Walt and Roy went back, and especially for the opening of the swimming pool. The one shot of all the kids racing out, obviously heading to the pool for the first time. If you look in the middle of the photograph, there's a kid wearing flippers. And
Oh,
I
yeah.
wonder how far he got trying to run in those things, because he looks like he's in a full, I'm stretching out and going to really run hard. And if you've ever even tried to walk in flippers, it's not easy. So I just thought that was kind of interesting. Is like how far before that kid was on his face, The other thing was the photograph just before that when they were at the home where they stayed, and they showed the kids, the staged photograph where they're in their inner tubes. It looked like, and I may be wrong, because he was very careful about this sort of stuff, especially in any kind of publicity photos, but it looked like Walt had a cigarette in his left hand. If you look at that, there's a very white thing there. And at first I thought, was that a ring? And it's like, no, it's way too white and it wouldn't be a reflection. So I just wonder if he was having a cigarette when they took that picture and he wasn't thinking about that at the time.
Well, on the first photo, you're absolutely correct. A lot of people laugh and wonder about the kid in the flippers. It really is funny, comical if you look at it, and just wondering, what the 2 seconds later photo would have been. Some of the young boys in that photo actually are still alive and are friends with Kay. So some of the people are still around, which is kind of cool.
Yeah.
And that's another neat thing about it. If you get out to Marceline now, you can still meet Inez. Kay is she's not young, but she's still, doing very well. But you could talk to Kay and hear stories about when Walt was staying at her house, or when she used to come out to California and Kay worked at Disneyland and Walt got her a job. And there's all kinds of stories about that kind of stuff at Disney with Kay and Walt and all that. But there's other people in the town and docents that actually, got to meet Walt and experience Walt when he was there. And so that's another thing that you could do if you get out to the town itself, is you can actually meet some of these people and hear their stories. There's this one lady, Gloria, who was one of the bathing suit contestants. And of course, she's like a 90-year-old or 80-something-year-old woman now, but she's adorable. And she talks about her high heel shoes that she wore with her bathing suit for the contest and all that. And it's just so special to hear stories like that from people, that were there. So, and on the second one, you're very observant, and yes, that's definitely a photograph forbidden. Um, he's holding a cigarette there in that photo, and I don't know exactly if that like in between takes that he just forgot to take out. If it was a photo that was sourced through Disney themselves, that would have been taken care of, because it's a photo from the museum. It's still in there, and but yeah, that's a good catch. I don't point it out because I know how he didn't want, you've heard his quote where he says that, Walt Disney didn't smoke, I smoked, and he, that whole little audio clip we've heard. And so I know he wasn't like proud and wanted to share that with everybody. So out of respect for that, I don't point it out, but people see it like you just did. So, but
I
yes,
saw
it's
this,
definitely
like,
a cigarette.
to me, it was like a laser just watching it.
Yeah, yeah, it was, because it's so unusual, because they were so careful to always edit any pictures out that had that, or, of course, before the digital age, you actually had to not use a photograph because there was no way to really edit it out cleanly, where now you could go back and do that, but it's just is unusual to see it because they were so careful. I know that one film they did several years ago, and I can't remember what it was, but it was part of the history of him. I mean, we went back to receive a honorary doctorate at a university, and he's sitting at this table and he's got the robes on and stuff. And right next to him, there's a cigarette with the smoke going up. And I think the only reason they allowed that to be in was, one, it was the only shot of him actually receiving the thing, and it was a film, movie. And secondly, it was in a position where you could make the argument that it was somebody else. It was the guy next to him, cigarette. You could have made that. But I remember somebody talking about that they had to really decide whether or not they thought it was kind of benign, and so people might not really pay that much attention. But the smoke was actually rising from it in the film, and I don't remember what film that was, but it was one of the documentaries that was done on Walt's life at one time, and not the PBS one that you had that clip from.
A little clip from, yeah.
Yeah.
So who wants to meet next week in Marceline?
Yeah, I'm up for it.
If you got, and I didn't put it in my presentation, but if you guys have any that you'd like to share with me or have questions you want to ask, you can always email me at my email address for the museum, which is real easy. It's roger@waltdisneymuseum.org. So if you have any questions about going out there, where to stay, all that, hopefully we'll get this thing Melissa's put together up, and it lists some of the places to look for accommodations and stuff. But for you guys, I wouldn't worry too much about making the trip out there. There's some hotels around in the area that you can book and get a rental car from Kansas City, 2 hours, and have a great you have a great experience out there. Go out to the farm, go out to Yellow Creek, try to find Yellow Creek if you can. That's an experience. So I saw
Still a lot of dirt roads in the area.
Oh yeah, it's all dirt roads, except for the few paved ones. Oh, and someone you were mentioning about or Werner mentioned about how it's great to move the track back to next to the museum. Well, that was besides the funding for it and all that, and getting the plans for it. The track actually is a closer match to from when I was told, it's a closer match to what was at Disneyland, not so much to what it was at in the municipal park, but they're all very similar. I've actually tried to do some side by sides like I did with the Main Street buildings of the tracks, and yeah, some of the hairpins and stuff, it's almost identical, other than the terrain and the stuff like that. But in order to put that there, we actually had to acquire that land from Santa Fe Railroad, which they were okay. So land from the Santa Fe, we actually had to take out one of the city streets. That was a path that it was a little asphalt road that cut through there, and we said that we're going to take that over and dig up the street and made it all a grass area, installed it. So it was quite a bit of an effort to get that installed, but it's a perfect location. It's not the original, but for these special events and stuff like that, D23 and other things we do, we can pull the cars out. Kids could drive around. Adults, if you're flexible and you can contort yourself in there, we've had Floyd Norman drive that car. He's been able to get into it. So you can actually, if you're of the right size, you can get in there and you can drive it around. So but yeah, it's better to be there. And then if you go inside and you can see the actual Magitotopia car to see an authentic one, that one's on display. So
great. Well, this is really great, Roger. I mean, I follow you on Facebook with a lot of your other trips and that. So if you'd ever like to come back and take us to Hong Kong or some of the other parks you've been at, I look at them and go, oh, I'd like to see. I've been to a number of the parks, haven't been to them all, but if you'd ever like to come back and share anything else with us on another Saturday, we'd be more than welcome to have you.
Sure, if you guys are interested, I was doing Zoom presentations. You came on and did a Zoom for my group that I did on Friday night. But I was doing a lot of presentations during COVID, so I have a lot of stuff in the can, so to speak, on the different parks. Things are always changing, like Walt said, so always have to update some of these presentations. But I have a lot of stuff in the can that if you're interested, or if you guys are desperate for a speaker.
Makes it easier for me. Well, great. Next week.
All right. Someone asked about Paul.
Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, someone asked in the chat about Paul Smith, and I don't know him, the ex-monorail pilot. I don't know if he's still there. Whoever asked that question, I don't know if he's still there, but I personally haven't met him, or maybe I have and just didn't get his name.
Did Roger, you
What
said the monorail from back in the opening of Disney World?
No,
someone just put in the chat.
Question. It said Paul Smith moved from Salt Lake City to Marceline. He gave tours back there. He used to pilot the monorail and could blur it out to Spiel on demand.
Okay, he's a good friend of mine, and he's in Salt Lake. And I haven't talked to him for a long time, but he did a long time ago, 20, 30 years.
Oops.
Full stories.
Broke up a little there. Just as she's telling us the good stuff, she loses the connection.
No, can you hear me now? Hear me now?
Yeah,
Can you hear me now?
you're frozen, but we can hear you. There you are.
Oh, geez. Maybe, you know what? I think turn off my Wi-Fi and maybe this will be better. Anyway, Paul Smith is a dear friend of mine. I've known him for 30, 40 years, something like that. And can you hear me? Am I frozen?
Yeah.
Okay. I just have to turn off Wi-Fi. Anyway, but he's told stories about being there and with Kay, and he did bring me a large piece of Dreaming Tree bark a long time ago, and I think a pebble from Yellow Creek too, but that was a long time ago. Now they, of course, well, it's not there. So anyway, and it's because of Roger's presentations at the beginning of COVID and yours, Bill, but with Roger's, I got to know a lot of people who have become friends, and I finally met, later that, but anyway, mainly because of having known each other because of Marceline trips. And now I've been twice and definitely caught the bug. So it's been wonderful and to hear the stories and to learn and to be there and to see and to have the Dusty Miller from Mavix. Ice cream.
Yeah, sounds great. Well, again, really appreciate it, Roger. We have one more talk coming up next week, which is I was looking at the picture in Walt's office, and you were standing there with the the desk behind you.
Yeah.
2 weeks ago, we were fortunate that my daughter came out to visit us, and we met up with Leslie, and we took a personalized tour of Walt's office. So next week, we're going to be going back, and it was great. D23 takes you through there in tours, but we would you say we got the special VIP treatment, Leslie?
Absolutely. It was fantastic.
So I was happily photographing all the silly stuff on Walt's desk and close-ups of this and that. I think we have maybe 400 pictures of Leslie and my family all standing there posing. I'll cut that down to maybe 100, 110. But I think you might enjoy it next week. So we'll take a look through the Disney Studios in beautiful downtown Burbank, but with a visit to the archives. And we got to do all the traditional stuff, the very first Disneyland ticket, hold the Oscar, all that sort of thing. So you join us next week. We'll take you back there, and we can go enjoy it. So again, hope everybody's doing okay, and we'll see you next week.
Happy 4th of July, everybody.
Thanks. Great presentation.
Thanks a lot, everybody.
Thank you,
Get back
Roger.
next week. I
Roger,
gotta
loved
be in
it.
Philadelphia.
Take care.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.